Hello and welcome to the opening session of the IRS Rail Webinars 2021 season. This is part one of the two-part webinar series on how can the rail infra sector implement FRMCS with maximum efficiency, produced by the International Railway Summit in association with Frequentis. I'm Jules Omura, the Managing Director of IRIS Events, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session. So at the last count, we had over 400 people from 51 countries registered for today, making this one of the most popular webinars we have produced. Welcome to those of you attending our webinar program for the first time, and welcome back if you've joined us before. We launched our webinar program this time last year. We couldn't run physical events, but the rail sector needed the latest information more than ever. So we launched the program without knowing if it would be successful, but knowing at least we would be playing our part. And in the end, we ran 12 successful webinars between June and December last year. 1 year on, the initial panic is over, but the uncertainty is still continuing. And the very high level of interest in this webinar shows that the webinar format is still here to stay, even on topics like FRMCS that are not directly related to the pandemic. We have already 12 webinars confirmed for this year, and I'm grateful to our sponsors for allowing the railway community to meet in this way. If you're interested in supporting our content-driven webinar program or participating in a debate, we're keen to hear from you, so do get in touch with us. Today, we are going to explore managing a flexible and cost-effective transition to FRMCS. And part two on the 30th of June will be on how can we ensure efficient FRMCS connectivity in rural areas. So today will be about transition from the existing systems such as GSM-R to FRMCS, and part two will focus on seamless connectivity post-implementation. The registration for part two is already available, and I'll be announcing further details on who will be speaking and how to register at the end of today's webinar. I'm delighted to have the support of leading opinion makers and innovators as speakers with us today. In particular, we are fortunate to have the support of Frequentis, which allows us to provide this important debate for anyone to watch for free. Frequentis is a leading global expert in safety critical communications. Many of the world's key rail infrastructure managers rely on Frequentis' control center communication systems to provide day-to-day operations communications, as well as incident and crisis management. So I look forward to learning about Frequentis solutions on the transition to FRMCS from the Head of Public Transport Solutions, Markus Myslivec. I'm equally grateful to Kia Fitch from the European Commission, Markku Voutilainen from the Finnish Transport Infrastructure Agency, and Camille Dierik from Infrabel for sharing their expertise with us today. This is an interactive session. The audience members are invited to participate proactively in the discussion. So you will see the chat section of your screen. You're welcome to provide chat messages to the other audience members. You can ask questions in the Q&A section, and Robert will pick up some of the questions being asked. And you can also vote other audience members' questions if you like the questions, and you can vote for those questions, and Robert will pick up some of the more popular questions. We will have 4 audience polls today throughout the session, so do vote in those polls, and so we know what the opinion of the audience members are. And finally, there's a handouts. If you can see handout section of your screen, the presentations from the speakers are available there to download. And so do keep an eye on that screen as well. And lastly, right at the end of the session, once the session finishes, you'll have the chance to evaluate this webinar. So this is very important for us in terms of how we can improve your experience in the future. So do please respond to those survey questions. We are tweeting live during this webinar. You can follow us at Rail Summit, and please use our hashtag IRS Rail Webinars. If you enjoy the session, do continue the debate on Twitter and LinkedIn. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guide for today, Robert Sarfati. Many of the audience members will be familiar with Robert. He has a wealth of experience and expertise in railway telecommunications, and it's probably not an exaggeration to call him Mr. GSM-R. And he's one of the creators behind FRMCS as well. Robert is Director Consultant at Sistra, the International Railway Consultancy. He is also the chairman of the influential European Railway Radio Implementation Group within UIC, the International Union of Railways, as well as being the chairman of the Technical Committee Rail Telecommunications at ETSI, the Telecom Standard Organization. He has many other engagements and achievements to list, but we have a webinar to debate. So I will now hand over to Robert. Robert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jules, for this introduction. I'm quite happy and very proud to be the moderator of that very interesting question concerning the managing of flexible and cost-effective transition to FRMCS. I'm just a quick reminder that the sort of what happened and what will happen. As a matter of fact, after the worldwide success of GSM-R global radio communications, which started the implementation in as early as 1999 and operation in 2000, it was the introduction at that time of the first digital radio system in railway operation. This introduction and the system was based on the digital radio system was based on railway needs, which were expressed in the UIC ARAIN functional specifications, and the MORAN EU project. MORAN standing for Mobile Radio for Railway Networks in Europe, which established the detailed specification and validation of the proposed solutions. The standardization was the key driver for this introduction, and therefore the basis were the ETSI technical specification and the 3GPP 2G standard as a dedicated frequency band ensured the full and complete interoperability of GSM-R. That's why it's a success story today, because it's fully interoperable. And interoperability is the key issue for today and for tomorrow. I'm convinced that FRMCS will follow the same pace as its successor, since using the same key principle of user requirements, which were established by UIC and revised and commented by all stakeholders, and the development of the standards at ETSI, which are based on the development of 3GPP 5G standard, encompassing the needs from users. Testing principles were established by Shift2Rail and now conducted within 5G Rail project, will ensure a soft transition from GSM-R to FRMCS. Allocation of 2 specific frequency bands for rail operation for FRMCS should even allow improving current GSM-R functionalities towards a wideband requirement and ensure the transition flexibility while setting up as the basis for rail system digitization and automation coming in the near future. And that's I would say the basis for what we think is the success for FRMCS. Having said that, I'm quite happy to introduce now one of the key speakers here, which is Keir Fitch. There is a poll which is already that should be available with the questions. Which is when you do expect to hit the new rail communication deployment for the FRMCS based by 2025, 2030, 2035, or never. Please submit your answer to this question. The Keir Fitch is the head of unit of the Rail Safety and Interoperability in DG Move, European Commission. The mission of the unit is to establish an interoperable and safe single European railway area, and managing the relationship with the ERA, European Union Agency for Railways, and Shift2Rail joint undertaking. This includes in particular pursuing the condition to achieve interoperability and safety in the rail system across the EU, in partnership with ERA, and ensuring the delivery of a long-term R&I program with the rail industry, which support the Commission vision for future rail and broader transport competitiveness, environmental and social policy objectives. Keir is the former deputy head of the cabinet of Siim Kallas, vice president and commissioner for transport, where he was responsible for land transport, security and state aids inter alia. Keir, the floor is yours now.
Great. So many thanks, and it's great to be with everybody today. And it's particularly good to hear that this important subject is attracting such a large audience. I guess my slides will appear in a minute.
Yes, and before that, let's share with the audience the results of the poll. So if you haven't voted yet, if you make your final choices, I think it's closed now actually. So the audience members can go to the poll section under closed, and you will see the vote, the results there. So the largest number of you said by 2035, that's 41%, and almost the same amount, same number of you, 38% said by 2030. So these are the two biggest responses, followed by 18% by 2025 and 3% never. So I don't know, Keir, if you want to comment on that before you start.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very encouraging, in fact, because as you see from my first slide, when we go beyond the title, I mean, the starting question for today, of course, should be, well, where are we today and why do we need to make this migration? Well, and of course, you know that the position today is that we are still deploying, certainly there are large-scale new deployments still being rolled out across the European Union today of GSM-R, which is effectively the first generation digital railway technology. And that has many drawbacks for us. For a start, the technology is obsolete. It won't be supported by the manufacturers beyond 2035. And of course, even today, it is very, very far from what most people in the telecoms industry are now used to dealing with and developing. So it's become a rather expensive to maintain specialist niche within rail. It's also a very inefficient use of radio spectrum. And as everybody knows, radio spectrum is a greatly prized commodity. We've had to fight quite hard within the radio community to ensure that we retain and indeed slightly expand the spectrum that is allocated to rail. But it's clear that as part of doing that, we really have to show we are making very good use of it. And of course, finally, though this is perhaps something that we can discuss further, GSM-R does not provide sufficient capacity for some major nodes today, and certainly perhaps not the capacity that we need for many of the developments that we see for the digital railway of the future. So therefore, it is, in our view, very important that we actually have a clear migration strategy away from GSM-R and onto FRMCS, and we do it as rapidly as possible. So I'm glad to see that certainly there is consensus among the audience that we will be making that transition relatively quickly, though of course my question was about when is all the new deployment going to be FRMCS. The harder question, the more difficult question is when are we actually going to go beyond just new deployment being FRMCS and actually move the entire installed base to FRMCS as well. So if we can go through the slides, I think I've already spoken to the second slide. So if you go to the third slide, which is FRMCS difficulties with migration. Yeah, next one. Now, why will this upgrade process be hard, and what are we doing to address it? Well, the fundamental problem today on board is that the communications module, the GSM-R module, is an integral part of the onboard system. It is not separable from it. To upgrade it will involve costly and complex re-engineering of the whole onboard system. And of course, that is not only complex, but it requires a full reauthorization. It introduces lots of risk, and it is very expensive. So therefore, we see this as being inevitably a major barrier to deployment. And of course, it's one that we need to address rapidly if we are to allow the industry not only to build at least new capacity with FRMCS, but also to be able to start retrofitting existing locomotives and train sets so that we can actually allow parts of the network at least to start in due course turning off GSM-R and moving to pure FRMCS networks, which is clearly what we would want to do from a perspective of making efficient use of radio spectrum. And therefore something that we need to develop with the industry a clear migration pathway and timetable for. Probably not today, but certainly something that we need to be able to foresee moving towards establishing over the next 5 years or so. So if we can skip forward 2 slides to the one headed key deliverables, and I'll come back to this last slide at the end. So what are we looking for in terms of FRMCS deliverables? Well, Robert's already mentioned some of this in the introduction, but some key pointers for us, and learning, I think, from the experience with GSM-R now 25 years ago. So of course things have moved on a lot. And the first one is very clearly that as far as possible, we should be using standard 3GPP specifications. We do not want to build any more than we have to a rail-specific solution with all the issues of lock-in and increased cost of maintainability, difficulty for further future migration that implies. Importantly, and I think this will be a topic for further discussion today, we want the system to be able to use both the rail-specific frequencies, but also mobile network operator, public operator services. This is something that I think was explored at the beginning of GSM. At that time, in the end, we've ended up with a rail-specific network because the public operators were not able to guarantee the service levels or to accept the liabilities involved in producing the mission-critical service for rail. But we think it's probably time to revisit that. We know there are operators, certainly in the Nordic countries, but perhaps elsewhere in Europe as well, who would like to use the MNOs to provide the backbone of the rail communication system. But whatever we do, also, clearly interoperability is our mantra across Europe. So we must ensure that the on-board equipment actually is capable both of dealing with rail-specific frequencies, rail-specific services, and also accessing FRMCS provided by the MNOs. Migration, of course, we've been talking about the difficulties of migrating on board, but there is also the question of how the dual system of GSM-R and FRMCS will operate in practice. There, as you can see from the slide, we did manage to secure a little bit of extra bandwidth to allow the migration to take place. So there'll be an extra 1.6 megahertz upstream and downstream, which we believe in most cases should allow dual system operation of both FRMCS and GSM-R in parallel. And as I said previously, of course, it's absolutely key that we have a migration system in place which gives reasonable notice to operators of when, in the end, we expect to phase out GSM-R, so that we can ensure that all the relevant rolling stock that users or might want to use parts of the network is fully upgraded in time. So where are we on the migration at the moment? If we can go back 1 slide to the next steps. Well, we mandated ETSI last year to develop many of the standards, so that work is ongoing. The frequency allocation that I've just spoken of will be formalized by a decision in the Commission's Radio Spectrum Committee July. So I mean, that's all acquis. And then very importantly, we are now working to deliver a revision of the technical standards regulation, the TSI, for Europe, and this will be delivered next year by the Railway Agency and the Commission. And this won't, at this stage, provide the full specification for FRMCS, but what it will do is provide a specification for the interface on board, so that from next year onwards, once that TSI is available, it will be possible and in due course mandatory to build locomotives, to build rolling stock, so that the onboard system includes this clearly defined interface, which in future will then allow FRMCS or indeed any other communication system to be plugged and played into the ETCS on board. And we hope that this will both reduce costs, allow a much more rapid upgrade of rolling stock in future, and potentially, though this will need to be worked through, either eliminate or certainly limit the requirements for reauthorization of rolling stock on that transition. So we're doing everything we can to make the future transition much easier. Now, of course, this still won't address the very significant fleet already equipped with the ETCS that we will have to manage a transition for, but at least it will mean that all new rolling stock purchased from the end of the transition for the new TSI will be fully ready for FRMCS, and therefore will allow us to upgrade much more rapidly at that point. I think I will stop here. I think I'm just on time, and I look forward to further discussion later on. So many thanks.
Thank you, Kier, for this presentation. I'm back here to, now we have a second poll, which is a second speaker. I thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm looking forward to the new poll, which is submit. So, and so that we have the result, which are indicating that it's going on. Marcus, I'm happy to see you on the screen now. Marcus, I know Marcus since long, and he has a long story, I would say, and a big experience in railway communications, which was ranging from the development of software for GSM-R mobile terminals, which are mostly, as I indicated, based on the 3GPP 2G system, and technical leadership in the fixed line operational communication project, which was his second life, I would say, as a technical second life. He represents Frequentis within HCTC-RT, which is the Technical Committee for Rail Telecom, and the Unitel, which is part of Unitel, which is a committee of Unife. Within the company, Marcus owns the technical strategy owns the technical strategy for the operational communication solutions within the business unit of public transport. So a well knowledgeable for whatever transport is. He is heavily engaged in the cross-industry transfer of knowledge and technology, as Frequentis provides communication and information system for public transport, public safety, and air traffic control domains. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to introduce Marcus, and if you can, I will let you comment the interesting poll that you have on the screen. Marcus, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, well, the evolution of voice communication technology, we all know, kicked off in the late 18th century when Philip Rice and Graham Bell invented the telephone. And the bearer back then was just a pair of copper cables, a principle that remained for a very long time. And still today, we are facing a boost in the technological evolution of the communication bearers. So in our daily life, we hardly care whether we have 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, or a coax cable to connect us to the internet. We just want to communicate with the world at any time and uninterrupted. Uninterrupted, like a control room user wants to communicate with a train. And this evolution of communication technology hits now our domain, which is railway in general, and control rooms, of course, when we look at Frequentis. I don't know everybody in person, but I bet a lot of you are engineers, and we as engineers, we like technology. We tend to specify and implement the most elegant and, of course, brilliant solutions, but we must never forget what our core business is. It's all about keeping the trains moving to provide the best service possible for passengers and for freight. And for that, we need communication networks. We need safe, secure, high available networks. And we want to use them uninterrupted, para-flexible, and para-independent in the control room and when we transit to FRMCS. Mission critical and broadband are two buzzwords when it comes to digitalization of railway. These two words sum up features which will help us to shape the existing and the new operations of digitalized railway. And I would like to draw your attention to two areas of digitalization: the devices on board, as well as the dispatcher solutions for the control room. On either side, we see the usage of para-flexible and para-independent concepts upcoming, but already in use today as well. And furthermore, the internet technology enters now the railway communication, be it either IP access for mobile devices, for dispatcher terminals, that's more state-of-the-art already, as well as web-based front ends in browsers, which provide the flexibility for the human-machine interface. All of these enable the usage as well as the seamless integration with the mission-critical voice, data, and video services. And these services will then be used to integrate and implement various applications. So some applications which we know already from today, they will remain, like operational voice or railway emergency call, and some applications will be modified and enhanced, like more precise localization, higher capacity for automatic train control. And of course, new applications, what we have already heard, will become available, like autonomous train operation, but also video streaming for the control room for situational awareness. An important side note at this point, this slide is overall not railway specific. Be aware of that, apart from the train you see in the middle. It applies to other domains and business areas as well, mainly blue light, public safety, and maritime. So to say, to everywhere where safety and security count the most in the control room. Well, coming back to railway, the safety and security aspects may demand a dedicated mission-critical communication network, again, like GSM-R. But this broadband access requires a rather high amount of spectrum, which we all know, which might not be available for railways. And here again, the para flexibility jumps in, as it enables the simultaneous and parallel usage of various access technologies and networks. And in our domain, this is already done, by the way, today using state-of-the-art dispatcher systems. And in the future, this will be done by this famous FRMCS, the Future Railway Mobile Communication System. So let's have a short look at the functional view of the FRMCS as it is currently standardized and nailed down in the bodies. If we look at the very bottom of this diagram, we see the, let's say, the functional split of the FRMCS. So we have the transport stratum, more or less in the middle. That's about the access and the core elements. And then we have a service stratum, which provides session and media handling, as well as common services. And the applications are implemented on top. So in this diagram on right, we have user equipment and clients who use the transport and the service to access and to implement these applications. And I'm perfectly aware that this is a slightly adapted view. It's not fully compliant to standardization, but I would like to keep things rather simple at this stage and focus on the main points. So on the left side, the devices are shown. They are connected to the radio networks like cab radios or handhelds, or to fixed networks like the controller or the dispatcher working position. The cab radios require an onboard gateway to attach to the different kinds of radio networks in this para-flexible way. And these radio access technologies will be the 3GPP ones, like 5G, new radio, but also non-3GPP ones, for example, Wi-Fi or even satellite. For the dispatcher working position, the situation is rather easy. It's just wireline, wireline, wireline. It's fixed line access. So ultimately, it's an RJ45 connector at the device using and connecting to the IT infrastructure. Then for the mobile devices, at least, the next part to consider is a 5G core. It takes care of the devices, of the connection state, of the mobility, and the linkage with the mobile subscribers. Following the so-called wireless wireline convergence, though, the dispatcher working positions may be connected to that core as well, but still they can bypass the FRMCS stratum partly or completely, as indicated by the other lines. The service stratum then provides all the session handling, the media processing, user administration, as well as the mission-critical services for voice data and video, including an element of railway-specific functions, like functional addressing or multi-talker control. But still, the operational applications on the far right provide the additional enhanced operational functions like we do in the dispatcher application. Well, that looked quite complex, although already simplified. So as the new, let's say, target system seems to be not that simple, if I may say so, what does this mean for the transition, for the migration from present systems to future ones? And we have heard just that there will be an FRMCS ready TSI in 2022 and a full-featured TSI somewhere in 2025, but be aware that industry needs some extra months or years after standards have been published to have products ready for rollout and for changing to the new system. And this change will be a significant one and a challenging one. It affects all areas. So the 2G radio technology is superseded by 5G satellite Wi-Fi. We will see not only dedicated networks, but also shared ones. And instead of simple voice and narrowband data services, a whole suite of voice data and video services becomes available. All this is then enabled by getting rid of limited bandwidth, but using broadband access, again, in shared networks, following this para-flexible approach. In addition, what we've also heard, just don't forget about the massive installed base of the GSM-R networks, which are still being rolled out. And for good reasons, by the way, it's proven technology, and it's still demanded by legislation, of course. But however, these big networks cannot be migrated to the new FRMCS overnight in a big bang approach, and for sure not if you want to have uninterrupted service in the control room. And finally, of course, the investments must be secured, either GSM-R or FRMCS. And summing up, I think there's a need for a long-lasting coexistence of GSM-R and FRMCS, where the interoperability is guaranteed at any point in time, and where the communication with the control room is guaranteed at any point in time. And the key element to take care of this is the concept of para.
I think Marcus' screen may have frozen. I don't know if Marcus, you can hear me. If you can try to refresh your browser, that may work. If you could bear with us, well. We sort out the issue. Just a few moments, and please, while Marcus will try to come back. Robert, I don't know if you want to comment on any of the content that Marcus has mentioned so far.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So that's
I think Marcus might be back. Yes, I cannot hear you, Marcus. I see that. Yeah, I can see you, but I cannot hear you. I think you can hear me. And perhaps I propose that we move on to Marco for now, and my colleagues will contact you, Marcus, to resolve the issue, and then we'll come back from where we left off, if that's okay for you, Marcus. I'm sorry about that, and I know you have some time left in your presentation, so we'll come back from where we left off, and we'll try to yeah, let's do the robots.
Yeah, I'm afraid that Marcus, very simply, he should have another application in play. Yeah. But, so thank you very much.
Shall we make one last try, Marcus? Can you hear me?
Marcus, just if you hear me, you have to close all the other applications you might have open. For example, if you have anything which is no, apparently, apparently maybe you have to call directly Marcus.
Yes, Big Marcus sometimes has some issues we faced in the past, so it's not your fault, Marcus. Apologies for that. My colleague will get in touch with you to resolve the issue, and hopefully, while the next speaker is speaking.
Okay, let me hand over. Thank you, Jules, for that. Let me hand over to Marcus. I'm sorry for that, but if you can just put off your camera, thanks. Yes. The Marco, he proposed the following in the polls. He proposed to you to ask the question regarding how much do you think was the highest average data usage per SIM per month globally in mobile network during 2020. The interesting point is, what is your assumptions? And you can submit that as soon as you are available, and you can do it. And we are following the result. In between, Marco, you have been working for the Finnish Transport Infrastructure Agency, FTIA, since 2002. Sorry, you lead the Finnish GSM-R network, and it was a GSM-R network at the time. And later on, the Finnish decided to migrate from GSM-R to another network, which is the Tetra network. And he was still involved in this transition, which was temporary. But he was he's probably the Finland were the only country doing this double move. And now he is at the heart of the introduction of the future rail mobile communication system in Finland. Prior to this current position, Marco worked with Nokia and Ericsson in Finland, Europe, Far East, Middle East, and over the more than 30 years. And he's quite experienced in the private telecommunications as well. Marcus, you are we are welcome to give your presentation on the 5G-based FRMCS network for railways offering. I hand over to you. Thank you very much. Your floor is yours. You can present the poll result. Interesting.
Yes, thank you.
Let's have a look at the result of the poll then, actually, in that case. If the audience members, if you can go to the polls section under closed, you will see the results of the poll there. The I think it's sort of fairly equally split, with the biggest number of the audience members saying 14.5 GB, 31%, and followed by the biggest one, 40.2%, GB, by 25% of the audience responding. So is this what you were expecting, Marco?
I think I don't know how much people are following these average figures, but it's increasing all the time, and especially when this COVID situation has forced us to have these webinars and not physical meetings, and it has boosted the communication needs in mobile networks. Okay. Yeah. Yes, good afternoon. I have named my presentation, what can 5G-based FRMCS radio network offer for railway communication in the future? And let me see. Yeah. And my presentation covers that how we have implemented our communication services now and our possible future options. And then a case study of the 5G network and its key findings and our long-term goal. And I think I have a lot to say, so I start to shoot. Let me see. I think this picture tells our whole story. We started in 2014 when we needed to make a decision, rebuild GSM-R network or buy voice communication services from other existing network. In both cases, the train radios need to be changed or modified. The railway communication is regulated in Europe by TSI. And in addition to these, we also have some natural user requirements, what we also need to fulfill. So the communication functionality plays a central role, and around them there are rapidly evolving radio technologies. The main question is how we can maintain these functionalities the services in the cost-effective way in this moving situation. Our solution was bearer independent communication and application platform, what we are calling as URCA. In addition to the traffic controller functionality, it offered important interworking function for the radio network during the transition period from GSM-R to the Tetra network, what we are using now. It also provides some railway-specific functions which otherwise would not be available in the used radio networks. The interoperability, what has been already mentioned here, was an issue with Tetra, and it was solved by temporary EU derogation due to the fact that Finland is a railway island in EU. The used migration principle was to provide similar services from old and new radio network, and train radios could be changed without need for dual mode radio. This is also the planned principles for transition to the FRMCS. The Tetra network lifetime which will also end, and therefore we have already started to prepare our next step. How to transfer communication services to FRMCS compliant radio network. URCA and new IP-based RAPLI will have an essential role during and after the communication transfer. They will provide the important network interworking functions and possible railway specific functionalities if they are not otherwise available in all used radio network. Public network and public safety broadband networks and FRMCS will be using the same 5G radio technology first time ever. This enables new and versatile way for different kind of cooperation in the future. Our goal is to continue to utilize some kind of shared network approach also in the future, if possible and if justified. What are the possible implementation options for this blue part is presented on the next slide, and this is the new target that where we are next going. One alternative, of course, is own FRMC core and radio access network using the railways frequencies in 900 and 1900 megahertz frequency band. Other options could be shared broadband network with public safety authority. There is a Virve 2.0 project, broadband project ongoing in Finland, which can provide interesting cooperation possibilities. Using prioritized services in a hardened public mobile network for safety related or only for other railway broadband applications could also be one option. What we are going to do will depend on the CCS TSI revision and real market offering. Then we did the case study because we don't know what will be the best way for us to do the transition to the FRMCS. Therefore, we studied this alternative. We made a radio network nominal plan and simulation for the selected part of the network in rural and in urban area. The required services was based on the minimum 100 kilobits per train narrowband services in uplink direction, which is the limiting direction in 5G network. Our main goal was to compare 900 megahertz 5G network to GSM-R. Could we reuse GSM-R base station sites? We have here the same radio network double coverage principle what we have already used in GSM-R. And the signal strength color in the coming pictures represent the minimum 100 kilobit uplink, and the other red is the 5 megabit uplink direction. This is the result. When all base stations are on, double coverage principle increase the cell throughput near base station, and it is possible to get 5 megabits per second or even higher throughput in uplink direction. This picture presents the situation when every second base station is switched off. Due to the double coverage, the basic services are still available, but you can see the effect of the cell throughput. This shows how 5G is functioning. It can provide quite large cell sites with robust modulation and coding schemes, but in the cost of the throughput. Here is some key findings. It should be possible to reuse the existing GSM-R base station sites also for GSM-R radio network. How much capacity network can offer is very much depending on how the GSM-R network was planned and built. 5G network planning shall be based on the defined capacity requirement both in uplink and in downlink direction. And downlink can offer much more capacity than in the uplink. But then the question that does it really make economically sense to build real broadband services by using only the FRMCS frequency bands, when public mobile network operator have much more frequency band available? And the answer, of course, is depending on the MNO interest to offer such services for the railways or the other. How to transfer the communication to FRMCS if you can't do it in 500 megahertz band? It's an interesting question, and I have no good answers to it. This is the conclusion of my presentation, and it shows the way from TSI specified GSM-R network via our TETRA middle step towards our final goal for the standardized and interoperable bearer independent railway communication services. Today, I don't know how and when this will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Markku, for this presentation, highlighting the points that you mentioned regarding the implementation of FRMCS in Finland and the issues that we had to face and the positive aspect also. Gilles,
yes, I believe Marcus. Yes, Marcus is. I believe he's ready. Let's try to see if Marcus can come back on stage.
Close his presentation. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I hand over to Marcus again.
Let's try, Marcus. Can you? I cannot hear you, but I think you may have a phone number that you can try to call to get. I think Marcus may have frozen.
Yep.
Like
that Marcus is frozen again.
It makes me think that we should have been using Frequentis' communication systems, next time, so we have a better, more robust system. And unfortunately, I think it's something at technical issue at our end with the big marker. So we need to try and resolve that, but it does highlight the importance of the critical communication, I guess, this episode. I suggest that perhaps while Marcus tries to come back, we
Marcus, could Marcus just join by phone?
Yes, I think Marcus is trying to.
I'm ready to just display and follow the presentation, so Marcus can have at least the sound. Can have the sound.
I think Marcus is trying to come back on phone number.
If you can call him and then put him on. I can make I know enough. I'm able to provide the slide navigation.
Sure, there's a dial-in number that I think Marcus is trying to call.
Mm-hmm. At least we can get to the the remaining slides.
Just checking with my colleagues to see.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah.
In between, what I will do, introduce the. In between, what I would like to do is to introduce our lady colleague from Infrabel.
Yes.
Camille Dierink. She is the head of the GSM-R radio tuning, measurement, and validation in Infrabel. You can see her on the screen here. And so after working as a radio network planner designing and developing the GSM-R network, Camille is currently responsible for the GSM-R radio department at Infrabel, the Belgian railway infrastructure operator. Her goal is, the goal of Camille is she's in charge of maintaining and optimizing existing infrastructure, but also to bring innovative solutions to build the network of tomorrow more clearly and more specifically. She is also working on FRMCS and in the face of the setting the pace for FRMCS future system in Belgium and in the in Belgian railway infrastructure, which is also an essential area in Europe because it's at the heart of the modification. Yes, we can hear you, Marcus. Marcus is on the. Marcus, if you can speak on the phone, Marcus. Marcus, if you can just speak on the phone, we will show the presentation and I will be just presenting.
But I cannot dial in, it's impossible.
You don't have the return from me? Oh. Are you using public operators?
It's unbelievable.
It's this difference between best effort and specific railway network.
I can hear you, Marcus.
Great.
Hello?
Yes, hello, I can hear you, Marcus.
Really? Robert as well?
Yes, there may be a delay, but we can hear you. So if you like to continue the presentation from where you left off.
So you can hear me again?
Yes, I can hear you.
Unbelievable. So sorry for that. Yes, next time we use our FTS to do the webinar, and then maybe it's better. Where we stopped at this slide, and I've just heard from Marco about bearing dependence, which is of course great. And looking at the dispatcher solutions as of today, I can tell you that the bearer flexibility and the bearer independence are not a concept, but a fact. They are already available in the real life deployment. So in the current, let's say, classical way on this slide, dispatcher core provides all the elements and functions for communication. We provide the session and media handling as well as the applications. So the dispatcher applications provide the role management, phone books, train lists, stuff like that. And rail applications consist of location-dependent addressing, railway emergency call enhancements, functional addressing, just to name a few. And concerning the radio access, the dispatcher core connects via gateways to the various mobile communication networks. So today, these networks range from Tetra via GSM-R to public networks of almost any radio access technology. The dispatcher in the control room, though, he or she just communicates, independent from the underlying network and completely transparent. And by the way, these gateways can also be used independent from the domain, so there are synergies when sharing the technology, for example, with public safety. Today, we see that we have specific mobile devices, which must be used for the specific mobile communication network, so for the radio bearers. But still here, there are also already concepts. For example, we know combined devices for Tetra and 4G. And this principle of combination of the bearers will now be applied to the railway domain as well, latest when we add then the FRMCS to this system view. But at this stage, from my standpoint, there is no common view. So how the FRMCS will be added here, at least not concerning where I'm coming from for the dispatch and for the control rooms. And so as there's no common view, there is no common transition and migration strategy, and we are pretty sure that there won't be any such fit-for-all approach for the transition, but there are good concepts for the migration already. So the first option to migrate to FRMCS, so to connect the dispatcher core to it appears to be just very simple. We just implement and deploy another gateway which connects this FRMCS like any other communication network. And important to say that this option focuses on the minimal impact on the deployment of the existing dispatcher core. Of course, the dispatcher working position in the control room, the connection and the usage for this additional communication network is again completely transparent. So the usage of the paraflexible concept is only extended to an additional network. On the side of the mobile devices, though, the situation appears to be a little bit different. To guarantee interoperability and seamless connection, we will need these onboard gateways, which enable the CAP radio to use the different wireless access technology. And this is also exactly what the gateways in the dispatcher core do. So they abstract or they translate their proprietary interfaces to common ones for the core elements. And just to note for the FRMCS element, we have currently two options. The standardization bodies are more in favor of this UE, user equipment-based interface. But here Frequentis is an alternative, and following also the approaches and concepts of blue-light organizations, we are also considering a server-to-server interface connection point for the control room. So to ease the migration and to secure the investment in a state-of-the-art dispatcher core, this option is of course the most simple and easiest one. But if we look at standardization, then we see other options at hand. So if we apply the FRMCS functional architecture, which we have seen before some minutes ago, we will end up then with this diagram. And you see now that the dispatcher core is somehow split apart. So the array application as well as the dispatcher application remain, but they are becoming so-called application servers. And as you will recognize, there is no dedicated standalone dispatcher core anymore. But because the session and the media handling as well as the basic mission critical services are now provided by the service stratum, and interworking functions are required to connect to the other non-FRMCS networks. You may conclude from this diagram that for installation and deployment, everything is now split apart, but that needs not be the case. So there are various deployment options and sharing options to bring this to installations. And what is also important here that the rail application server and the dispatch application server interface now a different session and media element. But again, this interface is based on our standard reference point and protocols. It's basically a session SIP, which is already used today and will just require some software modifications to connect to IMS or MCX or the appropriate reference points. So we have now seen two options how to do the transition towards the FRMCS for the control room, and how to migrate and how to implement and how to benefit from the para flexibility, the simple one and the more standardized one. But we shall never forget our focus, which is keep the trains moving while we migrate to the new communication technologies, and this para flexibility enables us to do so. Doing that, we can secure investments and we can guarantee the interoperability, and we can guarantee the uninterrupted availability of the control room when transiting to FRMCS in a flexible approach. Important to remember that there is no one-fits-all migration strategy, for sure not for the control room. So talk to industry and talk to us, benefit from the experience of other domains and define the right migration strategy for you. So let's manage the migration and transition to FRMCS in the control room together. Hopefully not as interrupted as my short presentation. Apologies for that, and thank you for your attendance.
Much, Marcus, for this conclusion, because it's I think it is essential that it was essential that you could present at least the conclusion, and we managed that finally to get that done, and I'm happy that you could do it. So please stay on while I'm just calling all the other. While I'm calling all the other presenters, plus Camille, from the polls that we had, I have seen that you mostly expect that to have no the absence of working of the rail system. 69% is less than 2 hours to put again in service, which is the very, if you have seen the other one, could you just answer that? Because, and so do you see any potential risk when using public networks for safety related applications? The answer could be yes, no, or I'm not sure. And I would like if you could then answer to that. And I see that the answer are highly majority answers which are coming. If I just waiting for a few seconds, we have more than two-thirds. We have two-thirds thinking that it's the yes. Only plus, let's say a certain number, 20% are not sure, which means they hesitate. And the people that say no, which are sure that no safety-related issue could happen, is in the range of 50 to 16%, 15 to 16%, which show the issues that we have. We have the advantage, of course, of the using the flexibility and getting the possibility to have application going on MNOs, but apparently it's a majority of you thinking that this should happen mostly for non-safety related application. Camille, you are here and I'm happy to see you. As you are one of the railway organization which is placed in the heart of Europe. So we learned from Marku that the range of frequency that could be used by 5G MNOs range from 700 to 3,500 megahertz. So my question to you is, do you think that Infrabel will pay for equipping all the trains with all potential, not only radio access technology, but RAN, radio access network, frequencies, which are available in Europe within MNO, to allow a seamless border crossing?
Well, Robert, that's a good question. It's true that theoretically and technically it's feasible. We have working groups that are working on those questions, namely the telecom on-board architecture working group. And it's true that one of the requirements is that it has to be 3GPP and non-3GPP independent. But of course, when we are thinking in practice how we could implement such onboard equipment being compatible with all the European radio access network, it's then being complicated. Of course, we are thinking about having enough places on the rooftop of the train to place all the antennas, but also decoupling the signals and having all the technical constraints and installation constraints. When you are speaking about the cost of the installation, of course, it's getting complicated because we are touching the rolling infrastructure, and it's, of course, another responsibility, and we do not have the answer today.
Okay, Camille, thank you. Thank you for this question. I don't know if anyone in the audience, no, in the presenter would like to take the floor, or I have questions I have also a question to Marcus which is related to result. You have seen the result, Marcus. Interesting. Regarding the number of hours, outage hours, which is acceptable.
I think you have said that it's less than 2 hours, the majority, isn't it?
Yeah, 69%, less than 2 hours.
Yes, it's quite interesting, and honestly, what we were expecting, we already see today when we do major upgrades, for example, that the maximum we get is overnight work, so 4 to 6 hours, and for sure, the 2 hours are not a surprise. We also see this in other domains. The communication, the network, the dispatcher, the control room, it must be available because otherwise you have a severe impact, as you all know, on the train operation. And this is what we want to avoid. And so I'm not surprised. It's more a proof of our standpoint that it shall be less than 2 hours.
Yeah, but my question to you, an additional question, is what kind of potential challenges are you expecting from the result of that? And when thinking to the transition from going from GSM-R to the FRMCS?
The challenge is, of course, as already today, you cannot show up, then you get a maintenance window, then you install everything, then you do a short test, and then you switch over because you will run out of time. I think you have to put up the two systems in parallel. You have to run them in parallel, to connect them in parallel, while the old one, if I may say, the GSM-R is still up and running, proves that the new one, like FRMCS, will be running as well. And when everything is proven, you have only these 2 hours to do the very rough and very fast switchover.
Yeah, which means that based on the what I see from the time for implementation, which is also ranging from 2025 with a low percentage of 19% to 40% in the rest coming after 2030, between 30 and 35. You mean by that you think that renewal of the operating center should take place after 25, and in order to be prepared for evolution toward FRMCS?
I think if you choose a state-of-the-art solution that you can renew and prepare your control room almost starting from today at any point in time, because connecting various communication networks, that's nothing new. And this will be the solution to do the transition. But of course, as you've said, when you do a modernization right now, you shall be aware that this must be fit for the future, so you can secure your investment, basically.
Thank you very much for this answer. Kier, I'm just taking the result of the poll, and I have a first question. As in charge of the interoperability, you are the best placed person to answer the question of how to ensure radio access flexibility while guaranteeing interoperability over Europe. You have seen the answers about the frequency of the public operator and the quasi-impossibility to put all the frequency antennas on the top of the trains, which is something impossible. We know it's impossible. Now, knowing that, what is your opinion on this aspect of how to handle this equation, which is really easy for us?
No, I mean, of course, it's easy for isolated networks like Finland, where, I mean, they were in the derogation and no doubt in future could be. But I think for the core European network, I mean, the only way of approaching this would be to find not the whole of the 5G public frequencies, but a subset of them, which it was sensible to ensure could be used for radio frequencies as well. I mean, here, of course, the most obvious one would be the frequencies around 700 megahertz, which are going to be allocated to various, I've forgotten the precise terminology, but the sort of mission critical infrastructure uses anyway, so light services, etc. So I mean, that would be an obvious one to make available for rail. And then, I mean, I guess probably beyond that, some of the lower frequency wave bands, again, with broad network coverage. But I mean, it's something that we will need input from both infrastructure managers and the telecoms industry on what the the best subset that we could insist on being available as part of an interoperable solution are.
I see a question happening, which is interesting, coming from Eric Opitz, is how is information security, cyber security taken into account by using public radio network? Obviously, there are some difficulty, and that's the result of what we have seen regarding the on the pole of the aspect of the safety related applications using public network. So the question is also how the cyber security and information security aspect could be taken in place when we know that the pace and the commercial objective of the MNOs are not really the same as the objective of operating and continuously and seamlessly rail in all over Europe. And you are in charge of the Open Europe for rail, and I think that's a very, very key and essential question.
Well, I mean, of course, we know that, and as I said in my presentation, that when GSM-R was introduced, there was a discussion about using GSM, and indeed, I think GSM is still used for a limited amount of infill even today. But I mean, in general, at that stage, the railways went away from using the MNOs because they weren't able to meet the service level or reliability issues. And I mean, it's an open question for this time round. I mean, clearly we're 25 years down the line. The MNOs have a great deal more experience of operating mobile networks. They are being asked to look at operating other mission critical mobile networks. So, I mean, if there is a business case for them there, then that can be worked out with the railways. And I mean, I guess it will depend also on the kind of network operator, the kind of terrain. I mean, maybe for the sort of the core urban areas, the density trafficked main lines, this will not be a solution, but perhaps for rural areas, for rural railways with low traffic density, there is a solution, maybe involving, I mean, certainly not accepting a safety risk, but accepting some degree of operational the potential for more operational deficiencies, which can be managed in a low density setting. But I mean, I turn also to our telecoms experts for their insight into this.
Well, if I may jump in here, so coming back to Eric Oppitz's question about the security of information, cyber security. I mean, yes, you're right, the MNOs also jumped now more than 25 years ahead since the introduction of GSM-R. And the simple answer to the question of Mr. Opitz is take the right security measures. We already use public networks for today, and for example, we ran a European-wide trial that's named Broadband for the public safety mission critical services, where multiple networks were connected to provide these services. We did that together with a lot of partners, and so it's all about having your DMZ, your firewalls, your security mechanisms on top, and just believe me, the public operators are very enhanced in security because, like railways, they have to protect their cores as well, maybe for other reasons. We want to run the trains and they want to earn money, but I think the measures to fight against the threats are the same. So I think there are the measures in place, and we see that in other domains as well.
Marcus, I do think that it's another dimension with the introduction of the full IP networks on what we, as we cite, is GSM-R most closed system with the advantage and drawbacks, of course, and it's not just advantages. And when you hear what's happening in the world today with the hackers, it's quite very difficult. And hackers and security is essential, as because we all know. We have a lot of questions regarding the TSI 2022, and then when and about the in 2022 introduction of the TSI. I would like to say, and maybe you can just Kier, you can indicate that what is expected for the TSI 2022 in terms of specifications and ready to build a network compared to 2025 or later.
Well, 2022, we will be including in the TSI the specification for the bearer independent communication module. So we will be specifying how you put in place the link to the onboard unit that then allows any communication module, be it GSM-R, FRMCS, or something different, to be added. But at this stage, we won't actually be defining the FRM module itself. The FRM module, FRMCS module rather, will be for a revision of the TSI in 2025, though of course most of the specs are now known. It's just that we are testing and getting the final validation of them over the 3-year period. So the idea of 2022 TSI is that once you build vehicles compliant to that TSI, you will in future be able to upgrade them much more readily to FRMCS than is the case with current rolling stock.
Yes, and thank you for the answer. And I think that we still have to explain that and to clarify that too, because there are a lot of questions on this aspect which are raised. There is a question which I have, which is the what happens in case of an accident, rail accident, for a line where the MNO is delivering the radio layer, the radio access. For example, the radio emergency call not transmitted or not functioning properly. Who's could be legally responsible? Which is the legally responsible entity for that? This is the question which I have also.
Well, I mean, in the first instance, the railway itself will remain its liability, or the infrastructure manager will remain liable for running the system. But clearly, contractually, the liability will be passed off to the MNO. So I imagine that will then also become the MNO's responsibility, and certainly in insurance terms, etc. I mean, it's the responsibility for absorbing such risks that I think has been one of the reasons that we didn't actually see the MNOs wanting to get involved in providing this kind of service in the past. I mean, undoubtedly that will happen in the future. And clearly the IM will still have an obligation to ensure that the service is available. And if it's not available, then presumably switch to some other degraded mode to allow operations to continue. But if the MNO is providing a safety critical function, then it must assume the liability for doing so.
And the cost associated, of course.
Yeah, well, of course the railway will pay that cost, but yes.
Remember, because we had an experience at the start of the GSM-R, as I already expressed, that 3 major railway launcher call for service, and all the calls were judged not productive because the cost was extremely high, and which is linked to this life cycle of the radio in the railway environment, which is rather 30 years than 10 years. For 10 years, I think it could pay for the cost. We get comparable costs. I don't know if we have we are aiming, or something is on the pipe to make a study, economical study of in different cases between usage of service and usage of the specific network for railways. I know that some railways are doing it, because I'm the chairman of ERIC, but of course it's something which I know, and I know partly the answer, but I don't know if globally the EU is thinking to that or not at the moment.
I don't think we are at the moment, and of course it's not strictly necessary for us, because we are trying to give the option to IMs. So from a regulatory process, we don't actually have to look at the different costs of them, because we're simply giving a choice. I mean, there is some economic assessment, of course, built into the various work streams in Shift to Rail and the work that we're supporting that's being done by UIC. So, I mean, that should give us some indications. but I don't think it's a work package as such at the moment.
Yeah. Marco, just the last question. Thank you very much for that answer. Marco, I have a question to you. Did you investigate the economies of scale when using prioritized public access? Which regulation would have to be changed in Finland for that? And people were very surprised that you were starting with GSM-R, going to Tetra, which is older than GSM-R, as a matter of fact, and then going back to FRMCS. They don't understand the sort of. I know the life is like an epicycloid, which is a point on the row of a bicycle, and that you're going up, and the center goes on, but the point on the bicycle, the edge of the bicycle is going back. So could you answer to that question?
Yes, thank you, Robert. It's very simple. It's the economy. We are now saving, I would say, a lot of money while we are buying services and not invested to our own GSM-R network. Actually, I think it's something 30% of the running cost. We are running the same services, and of course, when we decided to go for Tetra for temporarily, FRMCS was much closer at that time than today. But still, I think we are using a lot of group calls in something areas in Finland, and now we have a really happy centers using well-working group call communication system, and I think, and other users, they are satisfied. I'm satisfied because I can provide the same services with the fraction of the cost.
Okay, but
and then now we are preparing together with our supplier for the FRMCS upgrade. I think that in our Urka system, we are planning some midlife upgrade to prepare it for the FRMCS. But it's an economy. Same services, but what fraction of the cost. We are not so rich in Finland.
I think most of the people are questioning your model, economy model, because I hear that the Tetra at least will be discontinued sometime between 2025 and 2030.
Yes, so I think it can be run up to the 2030. The operator or the supplier is supporting it, and I think they have the same supplier than, for example, in Germany.
Okay. In any case, I would like to I think it's we have not exhausted the subject which is there, and but at least we opened some windows, and I'm happy to see that with the presenters, your presenter, we are able to address some of the questions. Not all of them. You can see that a lot of published questions. And I'm really sorry we cannot answer all of them. I was trying.
Robert, if this is Jules, I mean there are still a lot of questions. If all the speakers are happy, perhaps we can extend by 5-10 minutes, so that we can respond to a few more of the questions. If that's okay for the speakers, perhaps we'll. This is a kind of the benefit of doing webinars as opposed to TV debate and so on. If that's okay for everyone, maybe we could. Respond to a few more questions, perhaps. It's a nice situation to have a lot of questions coming from the audience.
Yeah, some of the questions are difficult to answer right now, which is, for example, how big is the chance that all railway undertakings are equipped with FRMCS in 2030? I think, is it possible because the standards are there? The answer is yes, except if you have some of you would like to comment on that, but for me, the possibility to have FRMCS on board in 2030 is extremely high. I would say 99.99%. I don't know. We never say 100%, but we don't know about the COVID. Nobody was planning that, but who knows? But I would say yes. The answer should be yes, except if some of you disagree with that. If I look at related to, a lot of question for Finland, but derogation exists in Finland, etc. So the migration, no, it's just for Karel Vink is asking the question about the defining a new FRMCS system. FRMCS is not as new, is a continuum, telecommunication. And I just remind everyone that the change requests to GSM-R are applicable to all releases, which are even the releases which are 2012, up to 2012. So we don't have a sort of suddenly a break. It's an evolution. An evolution towards the system which allows also additional and more feature which will be available, because railway are evolving as well. And as I mentioned in my introduction, we're talking about the unmanned rail system, and that's we have to give an answer to all the evolution and the evolution of rail towards digital, and that's mainly the question. So
just a second. I think that's exactly the main point. That this FRMCS, it sounds super new, but it uses technology like IP multimedia subsystem, which is not new at all, and was standardized more than 20 years ago, if I recall correctly. And well, the M6 isn't. But here again, it's so important that we are all aware that this better flexibility on the mobile side and on the fixed side allows us to do this transition and to use the systems in parallel. So we are not reinventing the wheel. We are just applying technology which is well known from commercials and from other domains to the rail. Of course, it will be a challenge, what we have discussed in the last few minutes about security. But again, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution, and we shall all be able together to manage that evolution in a smooth and uninterrupted way.
Thank you, Marcus, for this. Yes, Kia?
Yeah, and perhaps I can come back to some of the questions on the transition. Having now started looking at the Q&A rather than the chat, I can see precisely what people were asking. I mean, clearly the idea is that by the time we get to the 2025 TSI, that will include the complete specifications for FRMCS, both onboard and trackside. So once we get to that point, then clearly it will be possible for all new infrastructure investments to start using FRMCS. I mean, that is the idea. We know there are several big infrastructure projects that, of course, would like to do that. Rail Baltica, I think, is another example. So, I mean, by that point, you should be able to use it. And clearly, the specifications are being worked on and finalized by ETSI already. So, I mean, you should have a pretty clear idea of what the specs will be, even ahead of the final adoption of the TSI revision in 2025. I mean, clearly, the question about will RUs have FRMCS on board in 2030? I mean, that is precisely why we're making the change in the 2022 TSI to ensure that migration of at least part of the rolling stock fleet can be done fairly readily. But there is a chicken and egg thing. I mean, if there are lines that are going to be FRMCS only by 2030, then clearly those RUs using those lines will need to look to migration strategies to get themselves ready for them. But I mean, coming back to the question you asked Camille earlier, I mean, who pays for that and how that gets paid for? I mean, I think that is still a question that we need to work further on. And of course, it will depend on the speed of the migration strategies that IMs want to apply across Europe. I mean, we would like it to go fast, but then if that's going to happen, then clearly we do have to manage the economic interests concerned.
Certainly. That's a good point, I think, for answering the question which are in the Q&A. You share my viewpoint. I would like to say that what is essential is that to keep the trains moving. I'm taking your one part of the conclusion, Marcus. Secure investment. You all know that the investment done by railways today is billions of euro, and we cannot just throw them away. And they exist, and in the world, because I would like to remind people that GSM-R is the worldwide system, which will migrate to FRMCS. There is no issue with that. But we want also to secure investment. 65% of investment is within infrastructure. In other words, the part of the radio aspect is very low compared. And what is important is onboard, as you mentioned, Kia, and the part in onboard, because changing onboard is like in the public network having a mobile and then throwing it away and buying another one in the shop. It's very different to be able to update all the cab radio on board. That's one of the issue we are facing, which FRMCS is also there to answer. Prepare for the future, and prepare a future which is not 5 years or 10 years. It's much more than that in the railway environment, and guarantee safety-related applications and interoperability. And that's also that the key word. We are interoperable with GSM-R. It will be crazy if we are not interoperable with FRMCS. And that's I would like to say thank you. This is my conclusion, if you could agree with that conclusion from my side. And I'm quite very pleased and was happy with this exchange. And I will invite you also to be there for the next webinar, which is taking place at the end of June. As mentioned, it will probably be reminded later on. So thank you all. Thank you also the participants for their Q&A and the participation. Even if it's usually it's even better if we are face to face, but it was live enough that we could exchange positively and quickly to this and ask your question. Sorry for the question which you consider are not answered. Unfortunately, it's a webinar. We cannot take that. It's not ours for that. But I would like to thank all of you. I will hand over now to Gilles for the conclusion and just reminder of coming webinar in end of June. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you also to all the speakers for this lively session. Thank you to Kia Fitch, Markus Mislievich, Markku Voutilainen, and Camille Dirac as well. It's a very informative debate that we had. I think we've learned quite a lot of things about all the preparations that infrastructure owners need to think about for FRMCS, and we've learned quite a lot from the speakers from different perspectives. So thank you for being part of this debate, and Robert for handling all the questions from the audience. Unfortunately, not all of the questions. We had a very good list of questions coming from the audience, and like Robert said, it's unfortunately we've run out of time, but it's good to see a lot of energy coming from the audience. So thank you to the audience members as well for that. Just to before we go, we have 2 more webinars coming up in June. Just to start with the right-hand side of the screen, so this is the part 2 of this series on FRMCS, still supported by Frequentis, on how can we ensure efficient FRMCS connectivity in rural areas. This is about post-implementation, how can we make it smooth, and I'm sure there'll be a discussion on bearer-independent communication once again on this topic. So we have 3 of the speakers here. Well, Markus and Markku will join again, and Robert will be moderating this session once again, and will be also joined by SNCF Réseau from France, ADIF from Spain, and UIC. So do register for that. If you look at the public chat screen. There's a link, registration link there, so you can register right now. Before that, so we have another webinar coming up on the 8th of June on integrated rail data management in emerging trends for unpredictable times. And so this is sort of in the pandemic. One kind of silver lining out of the pandemic is that innovation is accelerating. A lot of rail operators, infrastructure owners are coming up with new processes, and one of those is centralized data management. And we'll be talking about things like predictive maintenance and various process management that are being done by some of the more advanced rail operators. And so we'll hear from Network Rail in the UK and Rotterdam Electric Tram, both of whom are doing something innovative in this area. And we'll also hear from Smart Motors, who provide solutions on centralized data management for the rail sector, moderated by consultant head of rail from PwC. So do register for these sessions, and thank you to the audience. Thank you to the speakers and Robert for this today's session. Apologies that we had slight issue with the technology, and these things happen quite often these days. But thank you for your patience, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar. So thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.